Monsters, demons, the Boogeyman, creatures that are neither ghosts or angels, entities that cannot be explained by logic or classified by science, just a definition of sheer terror in your minds. Here's 5 personal encounters with these folk. Grab a blanket, make a cup of tea, and let's talk about the thing that lurks in the dark at night. "8 feet tall and distorted." This is a personal account of mine, which dates back to the late 1970s, when I was about 19 to 20 years old. I was living in a house me and my roommates believed to be haunted, and it increased my paranormal interest. I was also actively working to make myself more sensitive to spirits, mainly through meditation. I had developed enough skill to sense and sometimes see or hear spirits. I was out somewhere when I saw an old high school friend of mine. We decided to go sit in a coffee shop and catch up the last couple of years. He spilled coffee down the front of his shirt and asked me to take him home so he can change. He wanted to show me some party clubs he knew later that evening. On the way, he told me a few of our other high school friends lived there too. They were all roommates. We arrived to an older home. It was huge, probably built in the 1930s. He ran upstairs to change and told me to do a self-tour of the place. Nobody else was there. The living room was huge, 10-foot ceilings and a fireplace. The kitchen looked original but well-kept and well-preserved. I had to use the bathroom, and I noticed the facility at the end of the long hall, so I made my way. Something moving caught my eye in one of the rooms, and I turned to find something that stood about 8 feet tall, fairly vivid, and not happy that I was there. It had short, stocky legs comparable to the rest of him, and his hands dragged the ground. I could not see the face as it was distorted. I stood there for about 5 to 10 seconds staring when I clearly heard it order me to in a low, gruff tone. I backed out of the hallway away from the room, calling to my friend, "I'll wait outside in the car," before stepping out. I went outside and said a prayer for those inside. I did not tell anyone of my experience at the time. I felt that I should not mess with whatever it may be. A close psychic friend who we call Bird was invited to a party several months later. Yes, the party was at that house. The only thing I told her was to be careful. I called her a few days later to see how the party went. She told me she was choked while in the bathroom and had an incident where she refused to elaborate about. It was then when I told her of my own account, which made her quite upset that I didn't warn her about it. Another one of my roommates went to the party as well. He said he was pushed by something he couldn't see and felt threatened by it in the bathroom. I talked to an old friend a couple of years later after that. I knew her from high school, and she dated the guy who occupied that room. I told her of my experience and those of my friends. She said that she could hear knocking on the walls at night, which kept her up. Her boyfriend who lived in the room was an ex-football player and was built like a tank. He had a harmless teddy bear attitude until he moved into that house. Things went downhill until eventually becoming violent with everyone there. He was eventually told to leave and made an incident requiring police intervention. That was one of my experiences, and I hope to submit a couple more. The blue man on my chest. I was living in Richfield, Wisconsin in my parents' basement. I was 22 at the time and never really believed in ghosts before that summer night. We do live across the street from a graveyard, and my cousin who stayed with me in the basement had complained to me about the noise our house made. He would hear footsteps, doors opening, etc., and no one would be home. I attributed a lot to the vents in the house, but this one night still gives me chills. I had just fallen asleep in my basement room and awoke to the blankets being pushed around my legs. I thought it was weird, but then they felt like they were being molded around my back area. I sat up in my bed and saw nothing. I laid back down and closed my eyes, and within 10 minutes, the blankets again were being pushed around my legs. And suddenly, I had a hard time breathing. I opened my eyes and saw a small blue man sitting on my chest, smiling at me. I could not get my breath. I clenched my fist and threw a punch at him, but as I punched him, he disappeared. My door to my room quickly opened, and so did this larger, heavy door in the basement. At that point, I could breathe much better, but I was totally freaked out. I jumped out of my bed, hit the light switch, hit the other lights in the basement, and no one was there. I ended up sleeping upstairs and never said anything to anyone, since I thought they would think I was crazy. My brother, who had played video games in the basement, has since mentioned the noise and asked me if I thought the house was haunted. A better description of the little blue man. He seemed human. He was thin, had a long face, pointy thin nose, and then smiled at me. He was maybe 3 feet tall. He wore a dress hat, a suit, and the smile was creepy, as if he thought it was funny that I could not breathe. The clarity of the figure was somewhat transparent. He was looking around my room, and when he saw me, he smiled. The eyes were blank. Now comes the rest of the story, and I've never told anyone. The next night, I went back to my basement room to sleep and woke up again to the feeling of those sheets pressed to my legs, like someone was sitting on my bed next to me. I was scared since I had heard that door open again and yelled out to knock it off and leave, but after that, I never had an issue again. I did ask my brother, and he never saw a blue man. He admitted that he saw shadows, but attributed that to trees outside or other things. But since then, no one has had any issues in the basement. A monster in my room. I am a 20-year-old female living in Ontario, Canada. The incident that I'm going to relate took place 10 years ago, but it has been bothering me ever since, and when I found this site, I decided to share my story and see if anyone has any opinions. Of course, as it was an entire decade ago, this is by no means an urgent request for information, as the monster or whatever it was has not since reappeared. I suppose I'm just more curious than anything else and want to know if anyone else has seen anything similar. What I'm going to do is describe the room and what I saw, and then explain why it couldn't have been a dream. I sleep in the same room as I did when I was 10, but the layout has since changed. When the story takes place, my bed was in the corner of the room, so the headboard was against one wall and the right side was against the other. At the foot of my bed was an armoire, which was not pushed against the wall because there was an electrical outlet behind it which my lamp was plugged into. The armoire was maybe 4 or 5 inches away from the wall. The door to my room is in the corner farthest from the bed. Also, there is a street lamp right outside my window, so even at night, my room is never very dark. When I was a kid, I would never close my eyes while waiting to fall asleep. I don't really know why. I would lie in my bed listening to books on tape and staring at the ceiling. But after what I saw that night when I was 10, I always kept my eyes tightly shut. The first thing that happened was I heard a soft creak and looked to see one of the doors of my armoire gently open. Not abruptly at all, and then it closed just as softly. At this point, I was not afraid. I was actually oddly calm considering how nervous of a child I was. I remember thinking, It must have been the wind, which made no sense because even if the wind could have done that, my windows were closed. Then I saw it. A monster or creature or something, I don't know. In the space between my moire and the wall, I saw a face. It was green with red eyes and horribly fat red lips. It had a very skinny body with long arms. The body was humanoid. Its head was very round and looked smooth. I did nothing for a moment, but then it gave me this terrible grin, and I bolted from my room all the way to the basement where my father was working, and I told him. Of course, he couldn't find anything, told me it was just a nightmare, and made me go back to bed. I would be tempted to also believe it was just a dream, but there are 3 reasons I know it couldn't have been. Firstly, my vision was not terrible at that age, but I did need glasses, which I obviously didn't wear to bed. When I saw that thing, it was visible, but just a little bit blurry, and no dream I've had, no matter how realistic, has replicated my vision without glasses. Secondly, I never woke up. When I have a bad dream and I wake up from it, it takes me a few minutes to reorient myself, realize that it was a dream and that everything's okay. There was absolutely no transition like that. I just saw the thing and ran. I never woke up. Thirdly and lastly, I mentioned that I fell asleep listening to audio tapes. Well, I continued to hear my audio tape playing smoothly throughout the whole event, not stopping or distorting like I know it would have in a dream. I've never read that book since. After that, I never saw the thing again, although I had nightmares about it for the next year. If anyone has any ideas about this, I would love to hear them. Even if you think I'm crazy, that's a valid opinion too. I hope my account was clear, and thank you very much for reading. Creature's Head. A few years ago, I was separating and matching socks on my mother's bed. The feeling of being watched came to me, so I leaned over to look through the big windows and saw nothing. There was a tiny window behind me, but no one could possibly be looking through that because it's so high up. And there was an open closet at my other side full of clothes, so no one could fit in there without being noticed. The same creepy feeling was present even after verifying that I was alone. I continued doing laundry. I'd humor myself thinking I wish something was on TV so I'd have something worthwhile to watch. It was likely a coping mechanism to the creepy feeling. The being watched feeling finally got the best of me, and I just had to turn my head towards the closet for reassurance. Then I saw it. There I stared at this floating animal-like head, no more than 2 feet from my face. I tried to get to my feet, but I was frozen in fear before I could run. It was dog-like with a long snout. Its fur was white and clean-looking, with longer fur at the sides of its face and neck area. At the sides of its head, it had long, curly locks of the same fur, but the locks of fur reached past my field of view towards the floor. The lips were very thin and pale, but evident. Its nose was similarly vague, only instead of what you would expect a dog to have. This creature's nose was flat with slits like a reptile's. It just stared at me with oversized, black, emotionless eyes. I don't recall seeing a reflection in them. I finally gathered the courage to hightail it out of the room, but my curiosity got the best of me, and just as I was exiting the room, I just had to look back to confirm it was real. For the few fractions of a second, I had to see the creature. I watched it slowly begin to turn its head towards my direction, which only encouraged me to run even faster all the way into the living room and jump on the couch. I informed my mother that I wasn't going back into the room, and that was that. I will add that this isn't my only encounter with a strange creature, but it is the most recent. I will also note that my dog had gotten ran over prior to the event, roughly a month or 2 beforehand, but there wasn't many similarities. A hole in the ground. We were going for a drive one Sunday morning. Me, my mother, and my stepfather. Just a bit of sightseeing of farms in a village called Philadelphia near a Blueberg in Cape Town. I wish I never looked in that direction, because what I saw haunts me still. We were driving past an open farm. The grounds were just plowed and it was just one large open field of sand. Suddenly I saw something very strange. I saw a hole in the ground and someone was inside it. It looked like he was busy digging. When we drove past, this little black man jumped out of the hole and it took a few steps towards the car, and then it just looked very angry as the car drove further away. I just sat in the back seat of the car, speechless. Till today, I cannot explain this one. It looked like a dwarf or something, but it used its forearms more than its legs to move. It scared the daylights out of me. In South Africa, the native culture believe it is something called the Tokolosi. They believe this Tokolosi is a very small black man that can do witchcraft, and they are very scared of it. They also believe that the Tokolosi wears his balls around his neck, and I'm not sure if that's a bit of an over-exaggeration. Many people claim that they have seen this creature, but mostly the natives. This is also the people that believe in witch doctors. I don't know what I saw that day. Could have been a Tokolosi, but who knows? Whatever it was one of the creepiest things I've ever seen.